time, or rather the absence of it. In the astral plane, everything is eternal. If I were to tell you that the reality in which you and I exist is just one of the many places you could find yourself in your travels, that you could just as easily find yourself in any number of other realities. As seasoned adventurers, this might not be much of a surprise. There are plenty of planes of existence after all. But what if I told you there's also a place that you can exist when you're nowhere at all? If every plane is a stage, then what lies behind the curtain, the scaffolding of our reality? And is it also true that this is the very same place that the gods go when they die? Well, students, that's precisely what I'll be covering today. Open your manuals because today we're studying the Astral Sea. Soft gray clouds move slowly across an endless silver sea, while strange dark streaks twist violently through the sky, anchored on ends infinitely far away. This is the kind of description you'll come across when researching the astral plane. The truth is, the plane almost defies definition. It's not even truly a plane, at least not in the way we understand them. But if I were to try and reduce it down to its most basic essence, I'd say that the astral plane is a realm of thoughts and dreams where visitors can travel as disembodied souls in an effort to reach other planes of existence. It's a transitory place. For example, have you ever wondered where someone goes when they cast Dimension Door? I don't mean their destination, I mean the in-between. That impossible moment after they leave, but before they arrive. That is the astral plane. It's the place within places. It's where you find yourself when you're nowhere at all. There exists no gravity in the astral. You can simply hover in place for eternity if you wanted to. There's also no hunger nor aging. Time does exist there, but compared to our world, it may as well not. So some say it's effectively timeless. And if I know you guys, your mind is already racing, thinking about how you can take advantage of such a place. Maybe that haste spell you just learned could last forever? But don't get ahead of yourself, because in the astral, movement is also different. Getting from one place to another isn't as simple as how fast you can run. It's actually directly connected to one's intellect. You heard that right. The smarter a being is, the easier it'll be able to control its movement by sheer thought alone. And this property might be one of the most essential to the plane itself, because while traversing the astral, you'll quickly find yourself untethered from concepts such as distance and direction, because here, up and down technically don't exist. In fact, if you have a destination in mind, and you hold it firmly in your thoughts, you'll eventually find it, so long as your will is strong enough. For example, within the astral there are destinations such as color pools or conduits. They're not quite the same, but they act as gateways that lead to other planes of existence. Some say that they might even be the only natural thing that exists here, the only things that actually originated in that place. They're probably the most common feature you'd find in that infinite expanse. They're scattered throughout, and if you wanted to travel to one, all you have to do is hold that portal in your mind, and you'll come across it soon enough. These color pools and conduits are far and away the most common methods of traveling from one plane to another. And in regards to color pools, it's said that this specific color of the pool will actually tell you where it's going to send you. When it comes to conduits, however, they're a bit more chaotic. They even have somewhat of a lifespan. When they come into existence, they latch onto a spot in the material plane and can even absorb things around it and eject them into the astral plane. This is actually one of the reasons you can find these huge chunks of rock debris floating there. Chances are that a conduit formed nearby and simply shunted them into the astral. But while you're in the astral plane, conduits exist as these dark, snaky tubes crisscrossing over each other into the distance. However, unlike color pools, the conduits tend to move around quite a bit over time. So if you stumble upon one in your travels, there's a chance it might be gone the very next day. Anyhow, are you starting to see how this place defies definition? It's like no other place in the multiverse. Do you want to know what happens when you cast the spell True Sight while in the astral? Normally, this spell will reveal the truth of any illusions around you, and can even allow you to see into the ethereal plane. But that's only because it directly interfaces with broader reality, as planes exist parallel to the others in many ways, like pages of a book stacked on top of one another. But the astral is geographically somewhere else. Even if you could see it, you wouldn't, because it's not there to be seen. But if you were to try it, you'd be instantly stunned in place for the duration of the spell, as it would easily overwhelm your mind and reveal the ultimate infinity of the plane. A pretty fascinating place, wouldn't you say? And we're just scraping the surface. But how do you even find your way into the astral in the first place? Well, as with most things, there are spells for that. One of which is astral projection. It's not the only way to travel the astral plane, but it's likely the most common unless you're a Gith. The spell creates a projection of the caster's body and places it in the astral while leaving their physical body in a state of suspended animation. This projection carries all of the owner's possessions at the time of casting. In fact, they're more or less identical to their physical bodies in every way except one. Around their back, between their shoulder blades, you'll find a gleaming silver cord that extends outwards for about 1 foot. This is their tether, their lifeline back to their physical body. And even though it looks fragile, it's actually quite durable. Very few things can sever this cord: a Githyanki silver sword, an astral dreadnought, or a powerful psychic wind, which I'll touch on a bit later. However, if this were to happen, if their silver cord were to be severed somehow, this would result in a true death for the caster. Some say without even the possibility of resurrection. One of the other ways to find yourself within the astral is a different spell called Plane Shift. Functionally, it's quite similar to astral projection, with a few key differences. First of all, this spell doesn't project you, it literally places your physical body into whichever plane you choose, and this comes with all the dangers you might expect. Normally, if your projection dies, you simply return to your body without suffering any of the damage. But with Plane Shift, if you die, you die. No takebacks. However, the great thing about Plane Shift is how you can send yourself to any plane that you want. You're not required to start in the astral, you can go to the Feywild if you choose. So yeah, both useful spells with their own pros and cons. But are there any other ways to travel the Astral Sea? Well, yes, actually. Because what would an Astral Sea be without astral ships? These are vessels capable of swiftly navigating the infinite expanse of this plane. In many ways, they look just like the ships that you and I might be familiar with, except they sail upon quite a different sea. They come in several different designs, from simple clippers all the way up to massive brigs that can carry hundreds of passengers, and some are even capable of flying between the planets of our solar system as well as the Astral Sea. We can thank the race known as the Githyanki for these vessels, by the way. It's said that they themselves obtained the knowledge to construct these ships when they discovered the magic behind the mind flayer ships known as nautiloids. These vessels navigate by capturing the astral winds in their mesh sails, which propels them to their destination. On top of that, some of these ships even have the capability to plane shift themselves and their crew to anywhere in our cosmology. Absolutely incredible. But now that we know how to move around within the astral, what sort of creatures are native to this otherworldly place? Let's start out with the most well-known, the Githyanki. The very same race that developed those astral ships, the Gith are native to the astral plane and survivors of a long period of enslavement by the mind flayers, also known as illithids. They're known to be typically arrogant, cruel, and aggressive, and often enjoy raiding the many worlds of the prime material plane. Generally, they reside in these massive spired fortresses built on top of the corpses of dead gods. The buildings occupy the entire surface, even the underneath, with populations in the tens to hundreds of thousands. They also construct numerous smaller, heavily fortified castles and fortresses throughout the astral plane to act as trade centers, as well as staging points for their many raids on the material plane. Now, they might sound horrible, and they certainly can be, but they're much more complex than just that. In fact, the Gith have been at war with the Mind Flayers for almost as long as recorded history. In many ways, they act as a guard against them, because as you know, the Flayers are what could be considered an existential threat to life. And what would become of the multiverse if the Gith didn't guard from this menace? It's honestly hard to say. Then you have the Astral Dreadnought. Massive creatures with a single eye above a large mouth filled with sharp teeth. Instead of hands, they have crab-like pincers lined with sharp serrated edges. These things are supposedly 30 feet tall and protected by spiked armor plating, and legend has it that their lower half stretches endlessly into the void with no visible end. Originally created by Tharizdun with the sole objective of hunting down travelers who search for portals into the outer planes. Remember those color pools I talked about earlier? Yeah. These ageless creatures were set loose on the astral plane with their insatiable appetites, in an effort to prevent mortals from traveling the space between spaces and discovering the secrets of godhood. And if all this wasn't bad enough, their powerful jaws can even chew through the silver cord of an astral projection. They require no food, liquid, or sleep in order to survive, but luckily for us, they're incredibly rare. In fact, they're so rare it's been said that there might only be one astral dreadnought in all of existence. And last but not least, we have the Psychic Wind. While it's not necessarily a creature, it's certainly native to the astral plane. A psychic wind isn't a physical wind like those found on the material plane. It's effectively a storm of thought that can batter a traveler's mind rather than their bodies. Made up of lost memories, forgotten ideas, minor musings, and subconscious fears that went astray, and they've all joined together in the astral to create a powerful force. First, you'd sense a rapid darkening of the silver sky. Eventually it becomes as dark as a moonless night. As the sky darkens, you'll begin to feel a shaking as though the plane itself is rebelling against the storm. And if one gets caught in this, you could suffer any number of effects. Anything from being stunned, being diverted off course, to severing your sanity and causing long-term madness. Some records even say that the psychic wind can sever the silver cord of an astral projection. For the most part, the Astral Sea is vast, silent, and nearly empty, a place of thought, travel, and endless stillness. But if you drift long enough, past the color pools, beyond the storms, you may begin to notice something, some shapes in the distance. And as you get closer, you'll start to realize those aren't astral islands of stone, but bodies, gods that once lived, now drifting in perfect silence. But we'll talk about them next time. Thanks for listening. Alright folks, that's the end of this entry. Make sure you hit that like button, and I'll see you for the next one. So be safe, take care, and happy trails.